Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and that makes this another in-person, the first ever episode 23 of Cloud Control. Welcome back to my house, Kate.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I was actually here yesterday too. So, you know.
So that's fun.
Some behind the scenes stuff. That's fun. We just watched some Yellowjackets, we're chilling. It's a good time.
You know what? Yellowjackets and podcast night, always a golden night.
Always a good time. I will say though, every time I come here, I realize that I'm really short. Like, it's a weird thing, right? Like, you just don't really think about yourself as short on your day-to-day life because that's normal. And then we do this, and I see the difference on the screen, and I go, "Wow, do I just look like this to everyone?" Like, what the?
It's the podcast. They say the camera adds weight. They say the camera also makes certain people look shorter. That's I've heard that before. Some may say that that's the truth. Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. You know what? We're going to get straight into it today. Something fun is going to happen in just a few seconds. We're going to give our impressions of the Armored Core 6 trailer that just came out, the gameplay trailer a couple of days ago from PlayStation. So is this the perfect game of the mix for Kate and I? We'll wait and see, but we'll talk about that in just a second. I've also been playing Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, which is pretty fun, and I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that. And then we also played a game from our past, back from the day of 1999 or 2000, Pokemon Stadium came to the Nintendo 64 online, and we obviously had to play it, and we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But like I said, we're starting off with Armored Core 6, and so I'm just going to put the trailer on here for anyone watching on the video side, but there was a gameplay trailer a couple days ago. We both watched it, we got some feelings on it, but Kate, as the FromSoft person, I have to let you talk first. Where do you want to start with Armored Core 6?
I mean, this is a weird one because, as everyone's probably sick of hearing, I am our FromSoft resident. I was just telling James, oh man, I really want to play Bloodborne again. I've got all these problems, but I've got
all these problems.
I mean, look, I don't lie on this podcast. But I've never played an Armored Core game, and I will tell you, if Armored Core 6 never came out, I would go to my grave probably never having played an Armored Core game. The mech stuff doesn't interest me. There isn't really a recent game, so if you see any gameplay footage, especially not knowing how the game works, it just sort of looks like mechs flying around, and it doesn't appeal to me in any way. And then they came out, Armored Core 6, fuck, okay, here we go, I gotta play this. But this gameplay trailer, in addition to some of the breakdowns I've seen, people kind of explaining what some of the footage might be showing us, aside from just being cinematic and looking cool, I actually I don't know. I don't know how much is genuine and how much is a Stockholm Syndrome kind of experience, but I'm kind of starting to get excited for this game.
So if you were to say what percentage of your excitement is the FromSoft brand versus what you're seeing and the breakdown of it?
So
I'm just curious.
I mean, it's powered by the FromSoft.
Sure.
If someone else is making...
But that's valid, right? If a studio you like's making a game, even if it's something that you're not traditionally into, you're still going to pay attention
Exactly.
to it.
And you know what? They've done so many kind of varied things now, and I think their design, approach to game design is so interesting that, there's a part of me that's yeah, I wish it was another Souls game instead. But there's a part of me that's I'm kind of interested to see what their take on a different genre is, and that might, enhance, maybe I find something I do like that I didn't know I liked, or maybe it's it just works. So so there's a part of me that is kind of glad it's something so different, just because I have an excuse to kind of step out of my comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And so for me, I would say, for Armored Core, I've played Armored Core 4. I used to have that back on the 360. Did I play a lot of it, or was I very good at it, or did I understand how it worked perfectly? Absolutely not. But I think mechs are cool, and that's why I'm at first glance I was interested in this game, right? But I mean, I think the couple things about this game that stand out a lot to me is that my instant worry with this game, for as cool as the customization is, I love the idea of that, games like Custom Robo, I loved making my Robo and customizing it.
Customizing my Robo.
But for this game, I'm just okay, how in the weeds is it going to be in terms of customization? I like customizing, but in games like Forza where you can just get in there to such an extent, and to a certain point, I'm just okay, how much do we need? I hope that it's not just menus and menus and menus and more about the action. But that being said, okay, well, the video stopped. I think overall, like, what's got me excited for this game in terms of it being from FromSoft is that the boss fights are some of the strongest stuff in Souls to me, and this game clearly is going to be set up differently than like a traditional Souls setup. But if they're able to translate a lot of that boss design over to something like this, I think that bodes really well. And the other thing that was really encouraging, and this is from that gameplay breakdown that you sent over, was that there was a quote from the game director saying that they wanted to be very intentional about the different stats and tweaks to actually be like noticeable in how the game feels and controls versus just like numbers on a slider of how much damage you're doing and stuff. And that's so important to me because I feel like so many times in games where there's this level of customization, it really just does boil down to like what the numbers end up being. And I'm really curious to see what that means and like how they translate that into like, so if I was to like come over to your place and like pilot your 8 Armored Core, like would I instantly be able to tell like, oh, we're using the same part here, but like yours feels so different than mine because of like X, Y, and Z that you've done? Or is it just like you get to the end of the map 5 seconds faster because your speed stat is like too higher? You know, like what does that feel like? That's what I'm interested in to see.
Yeah, and I think I'm confident that they're going to do a good job with that because from what I understand and from some of the research I've been doing, that's like the main thing that Armored Core has been known for, just as a series in general, is that the customization is supposed to be always really good. Like, I think part of it is just that, like, an insane amount of options, but also it's supposed to be very good in terms of, like, it does feel different, and I guess like the legs are important. Like you can have tank we even saw in this trailer, like you get the tank treads and then you're sort of like, you know, you just like zoom in and smash into people, and then you get various legs that are a bit more like agile, and you can get those like 4 like style
like the quad legs,
and they let you like kind of like hover in air a little bit better. And then my favorite ones from the trailer, because obviously I'm gonna do the light fast build, is like kind of
knees.
The back knees, because he can like hop sideways and like what looks to be like the best dodge perhaps. So I think like that alone, like just changing the legs seems to really change how your mech is gonna pilot. And then on top of that you have like, you know, like the 4 different like the front and the back on each side for like your weapons, and those seem to be like there's melee stuff, there's range stuff, there's probably like you probably maybe want a combination of both, or you can go like just one or the other. Like maybe the tank guy just goes melee and just like drives over you and like slashes around. Like, but it seems like there's a lot of variety, and so Armored Core is apparently known for that in general. And then I would say like that is something that they prioritized a lot in Elden Ring as well. So like the amount of like build variety and how unique a lot of the weapons were and all the weapon arts and being able to mix and match, that was something that they really prioritized. So I think coming from both angles of like what the series was known for and then also like what they've kind of been like working on in the past and they can bring from their more recent non-Armored Core titles, like it's sort of a match made in heaven.
I'm thinking of this too from like a design philosophy, right? So something that we do like in my work is we do something like diverge and converge. Like you have an idea, then you diverge into as many possibilities as you can, and then you like zone those back into another focus. And it's interesting because like for this, I wonder like how many of the ideas that they had for combat in this Armored Core and the fact that you have so many more weapons available, whereas in like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure there's exceptions, but traditionally in Souls you're like your arsenal is much smaller than it seems to be like the variety you have here. So I wonder if there's any like, you know, have they been sitting on a certain boss design for like a couple of Souls games that they're like, oh, this is so cool, but like we can't implement it with like the lack of weapons or something like that. And then like how are those ideas going to be like input into this game? And then conversely, with the different kind of combat they're using for this, what can they take away for learnings for like when they return to a Souls title? And I think that's also interesting because they're definitely going to learn, you know, something from this and apply it to the next one of those games too.
So I think that's the thing, right, is they've made it very clear this is not a Souls game, this is an Armored Core game. But they've also said that we are taking things that we've learned from our previous games and like enhancing Armored Core based on like, you know, what we know how to do, what works. Like we've expanded as a studio and we want to draw from everything we've done, which sounds like to me the perfect approach to take it, because like you want to be committed to having that Armored Core identity, but like you just made like 6 phenomenal games. Like you're not going to completely ignore that. And I want to harken back to the boss thing that you said, and I think I really see Souls the most in some of those bosses. Like, there's that big guy that has those big, like, windy up things, and then he slams them down, and there's another one that kind of seems like it does a very, like he flies at you and tries to, like, impale you on his spear.
That reminded me of that one boss from Metroid.
From Metroid.
From Metroid, the one Metroid Dread, you know, that last kind of, like, guy that comes down. I don't know. There's an attack that looks similar.
Yeah, okay. But it reminds me of exactly the guy from Elden Ring, too. Like, I've seen that move countless times. So I think that reminds me, because I think in the old Armored Core games, like, it's sort of more of, like, a shooter and less about, like, moving as far as... I think there's less emphasis on dodging and, like, less emphasis on, like, parrying and blocking. It's more just like you're gonna try and out damage the other person. Whereas I think in this, it really seems like those are kind of like the bread and butter, like, telegraphed attacks that you then dodge and get out of the way in a Souls kind of style, which is, I think, really interesting. Like, that appeals to me. I like that mix and match. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be a Souls game, but I always appreciate that in any, like, action game I play because it's really interactive. I feel like I'm, like, dancing with the boss instead of just, like, shooting at them and, like, hoping I don't die first, which maybe I'm bad at shooters and they shouldn't be like that, but... Well, that's an interesting point, though, because this game doesn't have to be a shooter, and of course you can use, like, melee weapons, too, and that's something I really wanted to ask you. We talked about the legs, but, like, out of everything you've seen, like, are you, like, wanting to use a certain kind of weapon? So... what's interesting about this game is I am almost taking as much inspiration or, like, excitement from having played Returnal as I am from a FromSoft game, because when I saw the gameplay trailer, that was actually the first place my mind went, because Returnal is a shooter. It's kind of like a bullet hell shooter, but it also made me feel kind of Soulsy in a way. Like, it's just kind of got that, like, same kind of atmosphere and difficulty, and just, like, the way it felt kind of reminded me a little bit of Souls. And so I see this, I'm like, well, it's like a mech shooter and it's Soulsy. I'm like, And what I really liked about Returnal, and it reminds me of here, is you got a really good dodge. Like, I think it's called, like, a side booster from what I understand. And so is that where you go, like, really quickly to the side, or you really quickly, like, dash around? And the Returnal dash reminds me of that. Something like, I really liked Returnal because, like, you had obviously the guns, but you could do some kind of, like, shorter range stuff, and you were, like, more powerful up close often than you were far away. And you also got a really cool, like, laser sword that was a strong melee option. So I kind of like to do, like, a close quarters, like, a little bit of guns and then also the sword. And so I'm thinking, like, well, if I really like that in Returnal, I could maybe build a mech that would maybe feel like really agile with the dodging, and then, like, shoot your cool plasma laser, and then, like, use the sword, and ooh. Yeah. I don't know, for whatever reason, my envisionment of what I want to do in this game is I just want to build the biggest, bulkiest motherfucker, like, around. I want to use those big tank tread wheels and just have, like, armor out the ass and, like, just a couple big guns and just drive around and just try it, you know? Like, that just sounds fun. I love it. That sounds funny, but, like, you know, people are gonna do, like, ridiculous builds like that, and I think it's a testament to, like, if you could make that work, and then I can have my, like, exact opposite build, and we're both, like, successful at the game, like, I think that's a good sign. I think that's, like, my biggest question still remaining for this game is, like, exactly how much variety is there in the mechs. Like, we've seen a good amount of variety in this trailer. Like, you know, there's lots of different weapons. There's missiles and lasers and swords, and, you know, and then there's all the legs we talked about and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like, how many of the guns are just, like, varieties on a different kind of missile? And, like, instead of 6 weak missiles, it's, like, 2 stronger ones or something, you know? Like, how many varieties of weapons are there? I think it's going to be a lot. Like, even just judging on Souls, like, there's quite a variety of weapons, but, like, I just feel like there's such a opportunity because of the futuristic setting, because of, like, the robot thing. You could really go all out with some, you know, really unique ideas. Yeah. And I hope that they capitalize on that. I think they will. Like, FromSoft always puts kind of, like, wacky, silly, crazy stuff. Like, I'm calling it right now. The pizza cutter is going to make a return. Like, the whirligig. And it's also an Elden Ring. So they've already brought it back once. They're going to have, like, this dumbass, like, saw you rev up and just, like, walk into people with the saw spinning. Because that's a classic. And, like, I'm going to put that on my mech. That's hilarious. But I think I would be surprised if they didn't put a lot of, like, kind of, like, weird creative stuff. And I would also say, too, like, this kind of goes back to the bosses as well, but you fight, like, kind of, like, looks like you fight a lot of other mechs, and I guarantee, is the FromSoft style, any of those parts on those mechs, you can have too. So like that guy who's like the big chain whip in the trailer who comes and whips you, like, or like the electric whip, like I guarantee like you can get an electric whip at some point, because those like mirror matches and they play by your rules is like such a FromSoft staple. And it lends itself so well to the subject matter of this game. Exactly. Because you're going to be like going back to the shop and buying new parts. Like, oh, that guy had that part, you know, like how can I customize it but put it on my mech? And like all these or maybe kind of you things. Like scavenge it off of his mech once you defeat him. Like there's like that would be cool. Or like if one of your what if in like you're out in the story or like whatever it ends up being, and you know you're in a fight and then like the sword I'm carrying is like busted, like someone broke it, so you like unattach it and you go scavenge something and attach it to your arm slot. Like that would be so cool. That would be cool. If you could do that kind of thing. I don't know if that's true or not. And, you know, the other thing I was thinking of with this game, too, is how fun would it be to do, like, PvP if it worked really well? Especially if, like, what if you could do, like, 2-on-2 matches? And it's, like, my big-ass tank mech, and then you're, like, doing your quick thing around. It'd be like in BattleBots, where they have, like, the main bot and then a tiny little one that's just kind of annoying, and I would just be the annoying one. Because if that ends up being a thing, we have to do 2-on-2. That would be fun. It has been confirmed that there is PvP. There is an arena mode. I think that has been confirmed, so I don't know if there's like multiple players or if it's a 1v1, but that could be cool. The other things I've heard that I found today, which are really fucking cool, is there's like a posture system kind of. So like if you do enough damage, you break them, which is like definitely straight out of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Straight out of Final Fantasy VII. That's right. Big inspiration there. I think you can even get Cloud's haircut. I think you can do it in Sekiro as well, though, Kate. I don't know if you knew about that, but no, I've never. Just so you know. Who? Sekiro who? Yeah, it's actually the same. Apparently the guy who designed the combat system for Sekiro is working on this, so... And that is a detractor for me, just because I found it very precise and difficult. It's okay. I don't think Armored Core will be a rhythm game, so I don't think you have to worry about it. But just some of those systems coming out. So we've got that. Yeah, I think the only thing I gotta say on it is I think the story's gonna be absolutely fucking awesome. It's very, like... You know, they're like, let the cinders burn or something. It's like, it's Dark Souls. See, I wanted to know, like, they obviously threw that in there to get all the Dark Souls people to go 3. Rabid and, like, 100%. You know, lose their mind and go feral. But, like, do you think there's going to be a lot of, or any kind of soul stuff in here? Or is it just going to be more of, like, a... Because, you know what, for one thing, like, for as cool as, like, really heavily referencing it is, in my opinion also, it's kind of, like... It would be sort of weak of them to do too much of it, because to me it's saying like, hey, here's our secondary brand and this isn't going to be good enough unless we pander to the Dark Souls people. Yeah. Like, let it stand on its own. So here's my take on it, and this is obviously before having played the game, but I think it's not going to be presented like a FromSoft story, right? Like, it's not a world you're exploring. From what I understand, you do go mission to mission. Yeah. And there's that person on the comms with you talking to you. I think so it's going to be a lot more like, I think linear, but like you get choices onto like which mission to go, so you have some agency. And I'd imagine maybe you get like comms conversations when you go back to the hub, and like you can chat with people. Yeah, and you probably get to make some decisions that change the overall story, maybe what characters like you align with and whatever. So but I think very much it's going to be more of like a kind of like traditional narrative style, where there's like more cutscenes and more like discussion in the game. And it's going to be less of like, I don't think it's going to be reading item descriptions and piecing it all together yourself. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to be FromSoft in that way, but I do think the subject material sounds a little bit Soulsy in terms of like, you're this mercenary that got hired and brought in, so you're always like kind of an outsider. And then it's kind of got this like, there's a resource I believe that's been like basically like refined too much, and there's not enough of it, and so now it's like the world is kind of getting corrupted by it, and like FromSoft always tends to be on like a kind of like an apocalyptic kind of end of the world sort of setting. So I think we might see something similar to that here, but I think it's going to feel a lot different in terms of presentation. So yeah, that's an interesting take, because for me, whenever it's like sci-fi, kind of like they're talking about like corporations and all that stuff, when they talk about like those type of things, like this resource is running out, to me they're talking about like we got a corporate greed, like it's not that's where they're going with like that to me. And I think that's definitely going to be an element of it, but I think it's like, instead of, my guess is that instead of it being like we got to take down this big evil like CEO, it's more of like, yeah, everything's kind of fallen apart, and like it was humanity's greed, and less like here's the face, the evil corporation, and more like the like, you know, like it was all of our doing as a species, because, you know, humanity is corrupt and all of those kind of themes. So I could be completely like assuming incorrectly, but that's the kind of feeling I get from it. Even some of the visuals are very like, you know, that like red, like bleeding red sky and stuff,
cool.
right?
That
like,
looks so cool.
Yeah,
I'm very excited for this game. I will say, like, I'm definitely more excited than I was prior to seeing this gameplay, and yeah, like I think this could have a chance of being quite a popular game for both of us.
Yeah, I think we were saying before this, we're doing, in 2 episodes time on 25, we're doing another of our top 25 combined games. So with Armored Core not being out till August, obviously not going to make the cut, but genuinely with the combined like preferences it's pulling from both of us, this has like potential to be a dark horse to like win next year somehow.
Yeah, you never know. That's why you got to tune into the show, you know? Never know what might happen. It's crazy. All right, well, I think it's time to move to our second topic, which is, of course, Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, a game which I've been playing the last little bit because it was on sale, and I felt like I basically stole it from Nintendo on my Switch. So I bought this game, and it's super fun. Like, as you know, I think if you've been listening to the show for a decent amount of time, like Shovel Knight's one of my favorite indies, and like I think he's just such a cool character. I love the universe. I love how like bright and vibrant it always is, and it's just so, to me at least, it's iconic. Like, these are all the same enemies they use in every game for different functions, and like, you know, just the graphics and like the music and everything, and all of that Shovel Knight goodness is in this game as well. But Shovel Knight, of course, is like a 2D platformer, and this game is a like top-down puzzle game, but it's also a roguelite, and it's also, you know, I would say it's got a decent amount of, it's sort of like an action puzzler in a way, like you're moving your character around the screen and whatnot. But basically there's 2 phases to the game, right? And the first one is like you're in this town, and I'll explain it quickly just because most of the game is the puzzle. So there's like a hub world you're in. There's a store, because as it's a roguelite, you can kind of use the money you use during your runs to buy new stuff, all that classic stuff. But you can also poke around, you know, there's like a few characters, and that's really where the Shovel Knight-ness of this shows through, because all the characters talk to you, and they have like that moving text that articulates, like, you can tell this person was scared when they were saying their thing because they're shaking, you know? Yeah. It's like the Paper Mario classic way that they do that kind of text.
The way the ghosts go, ooh, and then it like waves up and down, like, ooh.
Yeah, exactly. But it adds to that charm, right? And the town is really cool. There's a new character for this game called Puzzle Knight, and you're kind of in this pocket dungeon helping him out. That's something else about Shovel Knight in general, which I think is so great, is like the characters themselves are, you know, they're just so well thought out, I think.
The whole presentation too, like the way it's packaged, the art, like the music, like everything is just so like wholesome about Shovel Knight.
Yeah, it reminds me, you know, a lot of like the net navies from Mega Man Battle Network, how they're all kind of their own individual character type of thing. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of all there is to do in the hub world. The real game, of course, is the puzzles. And so there's basically just blocks that drop from the top. You know, there's like 10 rows, whatever. Like Tetris, the blocks come down. But in this game, there's essentially like 4 different types of blocks that can fall. You can have enemies. You can have just regular like rocks and stones. You can have potions, and then you can also have like special stuff like keys and chests and like a door where you can leave the level and whatnot. And you basically just have to survive and clear the board, and then you know, you have to bump into things to interact. So if you bump into an enemy, you'll both damage each other for the amount of attack you have, and then if you have any special effects, they get added on. If you bump into a potion, you'll use it to heal yourself for 2 health. If you bump into a key, you can use it to open a chest. Like, all these things feed into each other, but it becomes like a puzzle of how you're going to navigate around the board, because you always have to make sure, like, right, if I head into this group of enemies, am I going to have enough health to take them out and like make it up to this potion, or will I die and like lose all my stuff, you know? And if you die on the board, you lose all your gold you're holding. You have to make your way back. You die in real life. And the game is very punishing, you could say. But you know, it gets really complicated. Like, it's not the most like robust game in the world, I guess, but the way that everything interacts is pretty entertaining, you know. And once you make it to the store, you'll pick up, or you open the chest, you'll find different power-ups. So you can have like, well, your attack will go up, or you'll have an ice weapon, so now when you hit an enemy, it'll freeze, and then it won't damage you back when you hit it. And so you can pair these things together. And on top of that, the characters also have their own abilities as well. So Shovel Knight, like, when you attack the enemies, this is a crucial part I haven't explained to everybody. when things are on the board, so say there's like two skeleton guys next to each other, if you attack one of them, it'll hit both because they're chained together. Similarly, if you touch two potions that are touching each other, you'll consume both of them. So you're kind of trying to also set the board up to chain these things together.
Right. Kind of like the classic like match sort of board that is set up as to emulate. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's where like you really get a lot of variation with the characters, because like Shovel Knight is the main, like the guy you start off with, and what his special thing is when you kill an enemy, anything in that chain that's touching that enemy takes an extra damage. So he's really good at clearing like large quantities if you can set that up. Mm-hmm. And then the next guy you unlock is King Knight, and what he can do is he has like a special dash attack where you can dash like longer distances, and for every square you move, you'll do extra damage to the enemy you touch, but you'll take double from it as well. So you can do a lot of damage to like big things if you have room, but if you get boxed in with him, then it's like you have no special ability and you're kind of screwed. So it really changes up how you play. There's a few other, I won't tell you all the characters, but the one I just unlocked recently is very interesting. Spectre Knight. He's my favorite, by the way. So
cool.
But so his thing is that potions actually damage him, and he heals by killing enemies on the board. So you have to play very aggressively and actually avoid the potions. So it's just like it's completely changed how the game plays. And although it's not like a long game, I think you can actually, if you do well enough, you can beat a run in like 45 minutes or an hour. But it comes down to like, okay, you're gonna do it with all the characters. And then make sure you unlock everything, and there's this other portal you run into sometimes where this guy's just in there and he's like, hey, do you have the 3 keys I need?
He's like, hey,
he just shows up and he's like,
it sounds a little creepy,
I need these keys, and I don't know what the keys are, I've never seen one, but presumptively there's something I can unlock that further in the game and stuff like that.
Yeah, this strikes me as the kind of game that would have like so many like hidden unlockables and like secrets and like things to uncover, because like it just is like that's just kind of what you expect from these games in the first place. But also like I feel like Shovel Knight is like totally the IP to have like a bunch of like secrets and stuff.
Yeah, and there is like when you go back to the main world, we're in here now actually for anyone watching, you can actually like hit against the things that are in the world as well. So like if you're watching this little pink volcano that's glowing in the corner there, like that tree stump, if you whack into that, it actually opens up and there's like a hidden passage behind there, and there's another character that's like, oh hey, you shouldn't have found me, and like has a little thing, he says something that's like, oh maybe later in the game I'll find something I can interact with him with. So I just think this is a great little expansion of what Shovel Knight is. It's a fun puzzle game. Is it by any means the best puzzle game I've ever played? No. But, it's very fun, and I'm interested just to unlock the remainder of the characters and see how they behave and stuff like that.
Yeah, like, I think for me, like, this is kind of, like, the ultimate, like, replayability kind of game, because, like, first of all, like, a lot of what roguelikes are predicated on is that you want to keep unlocking stuff. Like, the second you've unlocked everything in a roguelike, it's like, okay, I'm kind of done. Like, that's, like, the main motivation to keep going, at least, like, that's how I see it. And, this obviously has a lot of really cool things to unlock, both in terms of like tangible stuff you use in the game, and then also like all the extra stuff outside in the world, the characters. And then also like because of the way the levels are generated, it seems like you kind of like you have a strategy, but it's never going to play out exactly the same way. Like
no,
you're going to get boxed into different corners, or you're going to be like in a weird spot, or like there's going to be a key that you want to get that's across from where you are, but you got to figure out your path to it. So like it's not overly complicated in the sense that you get like bogged down in it, but it's also like seems like it would stay very like fresh and like easy to keep playing for a long period of time, which like I think that's like kind of key to the success of a roguelike, is like having that balance of like it's fun and engaging but not too complicated, and then like you're constantly getting stuff and like
yeah I totally agree. I think my only thing I think it's a bit light on the roguelite element of this game. Like there is the shop, you can buy stuff for the next run, but compared to other roguelikes, I remember, what's that one we played, Dreamscaper? Was that last year or whatever we played that? We played a few over the podcast, but I feel like in comparison to those, like the frequency with which you unlock new stuff is a lot slower in this game. Like the shop just doesn't have as much variety. The items in the shop to unlock them are also far more expensive, and it's taken me quite a while to like accumulate the gold. So that's one thing. It's like definitely not like if you're looking for a roguelite and you're like really wanting to unlock and get that dopamine of like constantly unlocking things and getting new, this isn't what this is. But this is definitely like more of a stronger puzzle game with sort of some of that incorporated.
Okay, so it's like puzzle first, roguelite second.
Yeah.
Right. It's no Vampire Survive, but it is like a good puzzle game.
Exactly. But yeah, good game. I would totally recommend it, especially if you can get it on the sale. I recommend all Shovel Knight if you can get it, even at full price, personally. But anyway, I think it's time for us to talk about Pokemon Stadium, Kate. A game which I did not bring gameplay up on YouTube. So we're going to just cover this up quickly. And anyway, maybe you should get started on our experience with Pokemon Stadium.
Right.
Very exciting.
So this was a game, I don't think we ever owned Pokemon Stadium back in the day, but we played a lot of it. I think we had some friends who owned it. And then we also would rent it.
Yeah.
We rented it probably enough times that if we had just bought it, it would have been cheaper. That's probably the case. But man, I was so excited to get back into this. And my initial thought to replaying some Pokemon Stadium was that it looks and plays exactly how I remember it. Like so many times you go back to this game that you haven't touched in 20 years. And you're like, you remember it differently. You're like, oh, I didn't realize how slow it was. Or like, oh, wow, this doesn't look as good as I remember. Like, you have all these things that are not quite accurate. But this game is picture perfect to what I remember Pokemon Stadium as. And I've got a horrible memory. Like I said at the top of the show, I've got a lot of problems. And that's one of them. But all of that resource was allocated to the perfect memory of Pokemon Stadium.
Yeah. This game is freakishly similar to how I remember it too, which is weird to say. It's just so iconic, the UI of it, how there's the blue and the green menu for the Pokemon.
And choosing the buttons, it's A, B, and then the C buttons.
Yeah, very iconic. But, I guess what stuck out to me the most from playing this, obviously everyone, it's just a Pokemon battle simulator. And for those listening that never played it back in the day, it was, first of all, just so amazing to see these Pokemon in 3D when it first came out. Because you got to remember, we were playing Pokemon Gold and Silver at that time. And anything close to this level of 3D was just unheard of. So it was magic. But even beyond that, the 3D animation in this game obviously is graphically dated, but it was really impressive to go back and watch. Even in comparison with having played Scarlet and Violet earlier this year, just the dynamic kind of animations that each of the Pokemon have when they're performing their moves, it makes sense where they shoot the beams from and how they move when they attack. It does a really good job.
Yeah, and they all have so much personality. This is so much love and care gone into this one, right? Jigglypuff and the Idol's up floating around, and Ekans sways like a snake, and they all have not only just idle animations, but they all have animations for when they get hit. Sandshrew, I always remember he kind of goes back on one foot and shakes his hands to balance himself, and then he lands back down, and it's just, they all feel so unique. You feel they are a kind of actual characters and not just a species when they're up in this game.
Yeah, they're moving with emotion, or you can see they'll take a hit and they'll kind of be oh, and they'll fall down and then gather themselves and come back. Like you said, it is pretty cool. And I think, I guess part of it too is there was only 150 Pokemon back then.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's not an excuse not to do it in the new games, but I think it's a factor that enabled it to be done, so well in this game. But it was fun to go through. We went through, or I guess you joined me for part of it, but we did part of the Gym Leader Challenge. And I know a big thing for back in the day was you could connect your Game Boy in and import your Pokemon team from your game and see what they look like battling in 3D. That's something we never did. And if you don't do that option, what you get to do is select from rental Pokemon. So you want to go take on the Elite Four, you want to go take on the gym, pick from this list of Pokemon. Here they all are, here's their moves, which 6 do you want? And that whole process of going through the list and okay, well, here's Blastoise, he's got some shitty moves, I could pick War Turtle, he's got Surf and it's way better, but he's weaker, which do I want? That whole thing is just super fun. And in this game too, you don't bring your whole team, you just pick 3. So you bring your team and then you're going through, you're right, this person has these Pokemon, what am I gonna bring?
Yeah,
it's fun.
I think that's one of my favorite parts of the game is that the secondary selection. So you bring your full team of 6, and then you kind of get matched up against the trainer. You see their 6 Pokemon and you see yours, and then you choose them. And I always distinctly remember like the way you choose them is like the buttons, so like the C button or like A or B. And I always remember thinking like that was fun, which that's a weird thing to find fun, is like, ooh, up on the C button is like Bulbasaur, I'm gonna pick him. But it was like a fun mind game. You'd be like, oh, I see they've got like 2 water Pokemon, so like maybe I'll bring my electric, but then maybe they'll think I'll bring my electric and they'll bring their ground type. And like there was like actually a surprising amount of like strategy / like mind games as to like which 3 you actually brought and like which order you put them in, right? It's like we played a match and we played like with we just randomized which Pokemon we got. We just used a number generator and those were 6. And I remember like I strategically, like kind of as a joke, but also sort of strategically, I was like, I'm gonna put Rattata first because like that's pretty neutral and you'll never expect I'm gonna start with Rattata. But like it is genuinely kind of like a consideration that you don't normally get in like as far as I know, any other Pokemon game.
Well, if you battle on the competitive, you only get to bring 4 of the 6. So you do get to pick, like, if you were to play in that format, but generally no, like not in the game. In
terms of like like the actual like
not in the game,
not against a real person anyway.
Yeah,
but.
No, exactly. And for what it's worth too, like the AI is actually reasonably smart. You know, they'll switch their Pokemon out if they've got a bad matchup. And aside from like a few very, specific cases, that never happens in the mainline games. Just the feather in this game's hat. Also, mini game mode is a thing.
I mean, come on, that's the real game mode, isn't it?
I don't know, actually. After playing some of those the other night, I might argue that maybe we're remembering them to be a little better than they actually are.
Okay, let's all just off the top get it out of the way, agree that Run Rattata Run is the best game in the playground.
It is.
Followed up by the Hard and Rock one.
Yeah, and then third would be the Sushi Go Round.
Yes, Sushi Go Round is great too.
I think the rest of them are just variations of pressing A.
There's a lot of button mashing games, which oh, you know what else is good too is the Drowsy one. I didn't remember that game, and I don't think we really played it much for whatever reason.
It didn't look very nice.
It is. It is pretty fun though. I will say it's hard and it gives you a headache, but it's worth it when you win.
This was a really fun nostalgia trip though. I'm glad to have played it. There's not a lot to do in the game. Once you kind of get past the Elite Four thing.
But you can take 37 pictures of your sand trip.
Yeah, there's this weird photo mode that is just, like, why would you ever want to do it? I don't know.
So we were, like, after we'd done our, like, battles and we were playing around in the game, just looking at all the modes and, like, looking at the menu, which was fun because you went around that little map, like, it's cute. There's a photo mode, which, like, was really weirdly popular in, like, early 2000s, like, late 90s games. And you like pick a Pokemon, which I guess like maybe it's cuter if you've like imported your Pokemon from the game. Sure. You're like got a connection
and
to them.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to take a picture of your Pokemon. No. It's how it's implemented in this game.
So yeah, you go through a list of Pokemon, you pick who you want to take a picture of, and then you go to like this like photo mode and you have like 36 photos you can take, but they just sort of stand there and do like one slight animation. It's like, why would you ever need 36 photos? And just something about it was so funny. Like, what a gross overestimation of like how many photos you'd realistically take. And we were just like howling laughing at this, like, oh, what do you think of this picture of Charmeleon? And you're like, think it's good? Okay, what about this one?
He's like the same, just like slightly moved.
And then you like go in the gallery and you can like look at them all. Like, it's just a cute little bonus feature that like I'm sure wasn't too difficult to implement, and like whoever is enjoying it, that's great. But like, yeah, I did not remember that was in the game at all.
I don't think we ever used it in the game. No. The other thing that was in the game that I didn't know was once I beat the Elite Four, and I guess maybe we either didn't do that or we just forgot, but like I unlocked like a Hitmonchan that I think I could have imported into my Game Boy if I was to connect it. Like back in the day. So that's actually pretty cool that they had like a mystery gift thing attached to it.
Yeah, so overall impression, I would say I think the game's pretty fun to like have a night or two of it. Like it's fun doing the battles, especially back with like the Gen 1 jank that, has been...
those weird mechanics.
Yeah, it's been gone for so long, and like it's cool seeing the Pokemon, it's nostalgic. Like the minigames kind of suck aside from Run Rattata Run, which is great. But like, yeah, you can play them for 20 minutes, then kind of be good. But I'd say it's a really fun nostalgia trip, that I would recommend to go back and play if you had it as a kid, or if you were like, you know, maybe got into Pokemon a little bit later and never experienced it. So this is like a cool like way to go back and see some like Pokemon history.
I think if you played it as a kid, you have to go back and play it.
Yeah.
Because you'll be impressed with like how well at least for us. I guess we had a similar, I'm just judging it because we had the same experience with that. So I don't know.
I will say as a caveat though, you cannot play this with one Joy-Con. You have to have both Joy-Cons or a Pro controller. Because we thought we'd play like 4-player mini games and then found out to our disappointment that doesn't work.
Even though all of them take only 1 or 2 buttons at most.
Yeah, exactly. So just be aware of that because that led to some disappointment. Get your buddies to bring over some extra controllers. Yeah. But yeah, otherwise, man, play some Pokemon and look how fucking creepy and big Lickitung's tongue is, everyone. And, you know.
There we go.
There we go.
All right, and with that, I think that brings us right to our favorite part of the show. It's listener mail, everybody. And if you want to be cool, just like our submission today from Jonah, you can send a mail yourself to CloudControlPod@proton.me, or get in touch with us on Twitter, as we always say. We have links all over the place. But we appreciate everyone that writes in with questions because, you know, you never know what we're going to get out of the mailbag and what we might get to talk about.
Yeah, so our question today, as is up on screen for anyone watching,
it's really small for Kate.
Oh man, it's really small for me though. Oh god, it's a good thing I'm wearing my glasses. What are some of your most memorable quotes from a video game? Which is delightful because there are some cool lines from games, and there are definitely some I just use in my day-to-day life that like I don't even think about the game anymore because they're just like, you know, like things you say.
You know, the first thing that came to my head from this, and I don't know the context, but isn't like people when they yell like Leroy Jenkins, isn't that from the game, right? That's like wow.
I think that's from someone playing. Like it's a famous clip of someone playing WoW. I don't think it's not an actual quote from the game. But you know what? This is worded in a way where I think that's not how I interpret it, but is totally valid.
That just came to my head.
Yeah, and Leroy Jenkins is definitely like, that's a legacy that extends way past WoW at this point.
Yeah. Well, considering I know that you're probably almost for sure you're going to have one from God of War because we both talk about that all the time. Mm-hmm. I think for me, if we're talking about God of War, it's got to be the don't be sorry, be better, or don't be good, be better, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's Kratos. It is don't be sorry, be better.
I love
that is
that
one
quote.
Of the first things I thought of. that is something I do say in my day-to-day life. I was having, like, my friend and I had like, a disagreement the other day. And, like, genuinely, like, he was, like, apologizing for something. And it was, like, fine. It was more of, like, a misunderstanding. And, you know, that happens in your relationships. And you talk it through. And it's a very healthy, good thing to do. And at the end of the conversation, I was like, well, you know what we've learned today? Don't be sorry, be better. He was like, is that God of War? I'm like, yes.
That's awesome.
Yes, it is.
That game is just so quotable, though. Like, you can look it up and have so many.
Yeah, I think that's good. So I'm glad you said that one because I had 2 that I was considering. And I think that's the one that sticks with me more. Mm-hmm. But I'll never, ever forget Brock in Ragnarok. And he says, the nature of a thing is more important than the form of a thing. Mm. And I think that is beautiful, both in terms of just how you could apply that to things in your real life and also like the scene that comes from is such an emotional, memorable scene in the game. But I think like Brock is very poetic at times. So
Brock is poetic. I mean, yeah, what a good pick, I think. So for me, I was thinking back to some of my favorite characters, and it's funny because I drank coffee from my Godo Phoenix Wright mug this morning, and you know, I gotta admit, like, it's not like I remember the quotes from this guy, like when I'm thinking about that game or anything. But I just always remember him like slinging these like one-liners across the bench, you know, like when he's looking over at Phoenix, and like it's kind of that noir kind of feeling to him, you know. And you know, I've got a list of them up here, and I actually am just gonna read the first one because I think it's actually pretty cool. It's justice is blind, but she's not deaf. Sometimes you just have to know when not to talk. And I like that quote. Like, that's cool.
That is cool. That's probably, like, one of his ones that makes more sense. Yeah. Like, sometimes he just says, like, kind of, like, vague, weird things and is like, for my dark blend.
Well, another one of his quotes is, a boy only gets one chance in his life to become a man. So...
Okay. What does that mean?
Men are like colonies of bacteria. The more heat you apply, the faster they grow. Like, what does that mean? I don't know.
Thanks, Goto. That first one is looking really good in comparison now. That's awesome.
Yeah, what else you got?
I've got one actually from Undertale that I think is a really good quote. And it comes at the end of the game. So you make it through, and you don't want to spoil the game because it's definitely one of those, like, you gotta experience it. But it's, a lot of it's questioning, like, you know, it's got the, like, do you do pacifist or, like, whatever. And it's questioning your, like, humanity a lot of the time as you go through. And you kind of are going through various trials, and you get to the end of the game, and it's actually not like a line of dialogue, but it's a mirror in a house. And if you, like, click to interact with the mirror, you can see your character in it. You see the character in the mirror, and then it says, despite everything, it's still you. And, like, that is, like, that's almost a, like, make you cry kind of line. You don't expect it. Like, you're just in the house, like, you know, you press on the fridge, and, like, there's, like, oh, there's this pie in here, and it's just kind of funny, silly stuff. You get to the mirror, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna just pause for a moment.
Yeah.
Like,
you know, that's really interesting that you bring that up, because the last game that came to my mind, and what my real answer for this, like what I really want to say, is actually Eastward, a game that I want to talk about on the show, hopefully next time when I finish it. But this game is really cool, and it gets compared a lot of the time to Earthbound, and by association Undertale,
right,
by the way that it tells some of its story. And one thing that I love about the game, in fact, probably my favorite thing about the game, is that when you save, you go to the fridge and you save. Like on Earthbound, you call on the phone and you save by calling. In this game, you save by going to the fridge, and like you open the fridge, and who knows what you do.
Right, you're
but
like,
it saves the game.
God, I hope there's a good snack in here.
Yeah, but the fridge will always, when you interact to save, it will always give you a quote, and it's always something like really insightful about life, like you're saying with that mirror. And I wish that I could find a quote. I just tried to Google them, like before we started the podcast, and for some reason I cannot find them. I'm shocked that there's not a list of these, because they are prophetic, some of these things that it says. And I want to like make a list of these for the internet if it doesn't exist. I'm gonna do it. But like one of my favorite ones, it was saying like, think of your mind as a cobweb, and how sometimes pieces of dust drift through, and that's how your memories are forgotten.
Wow. Stuff
like that. And I was just like sitting there like, whoa, that is so cool. Like, it's obviously put better than I'm saying it there, but like that kind of idea. Or like, you know, sometimes it'll be things like, you know, you reach into the fridge and you can't remember where you put something, but did that really happen at all? Or was it ever really there? Like, it has just these things, and it's almost like you sit there and think about your life for a second when you save the game in Eastward.
That's very philosophical and thought-provoking.
Yeah, and every save station has a different quote. So when you go to a save station, you'll get something new. I love it.
That is cool. I think that would be like, that's like low-key a highlight. Like, that makes me want to play the game more than any other thing I know about Eastward.
Yeah. It's a gem for that reason, for sure. But it's just like, I don't know where that would have come from. Like, they clearly have someone on the design team there that's like got these wicked quotes.
Yeah, it's like if fortune cookies were really good.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was your big one?
That was my big one.
Do you have any more?
No, I'm good. I mean, I honestly wish I could think of more, but I just can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like they just kind of come to you,
There's classic
right?
ones. Like obviously the Would You Kindly from BioShock is like such a classic. Yeah. That kind of thing.
I put down from BioShock, a man chooses, a slave obeys, because I think, to me, of the lines from BioShock, that's a more powerful one, but like obviously they're
the
iconic.
Would You Kindly is powerful when you're playing the game and you see how it works, but that's not going to stick with you.
Yeah, exactly. But the moment of like, a man chooses, a slave obeys, like, oh shit, if you played BioShock. Yeah, those are good. I've got a couple like FromSoft ones to close this out, because obviously like, you know, that's where I went. So I've got one from Sekiro, one from Bloodborne, and then I'll finish us out with an Elden Ring, perhaps. So the Sekiro one is like a cool badass line. So you fight Genichiro. He's a cool boss.
He beat the shit out of me a few times.
He is on top of that tower. He's no joke. But Sekiro doesn't talk a whole lot in that game. Like, he's not a purely silent protagonist, but like, he's quiet. But he walks up there and like there's a conflict going on. He's like, you got Kuro with you, the kid you're protecting, and he goes to like you know, they're kind of in the process of having a conversation, like there's some threats going on, and like this boss is gonna kick your ass, but Sekiro walks up there and he's like, this will only take a moment, and like just think, and he like kind of unsheaths his sword at that moment. It's like the confidence, like, do you know how many times we're gonna die to this guy? Like, do not be that confident.
Yeah, the first time you run, you say that and you get flattened and just like you're dead.
But then the time you do beat him, you're like, this will only take a moment, and then every other boss fight you go up to after that, in my head, I'm like, this will only take a moment. So that's the most badass line. My actual favorite From Software line, and the one I think about in my day-to-day life, is from my favorite From Software character. And actually, I'll let you take a guess. Who do you think that is?
Oh, God.
It's Bloodborne. I'll give you a hint. My favorite character in any From Software.
Oh, I know. It's the Crow.
No, but she's very cool.
Oh, it's Father Gascoigne.
Oh, he's very cool too, but
I'm out then.
It's the doll.
Oh, okay.
The doll is by far my favorite FromSoft character, and what she says to you, everything she says is phenomenal. But
that's a great pick, actually, her. She has some good lines.
But at the very end, whenever you leave her, whenever you end in a conversation, she says to you, may you find your worth in the waking world. And like something about that, just like I find it very inspiring. Like, you know, it's that whole like, you know, like stuff doesn't come to you, like you go step out, you find your own worth, like. And obviously it works in the context of the game, but I don't know. I sometimes say it to myself when I leave the house in the morning, you know, like, go find your worth in the waking world, and off you go. And hopefully it's not in Bloodborne, because that's a tough one.
Wow, that's an awesome pick. You have one more, right? You said?
I do have one more, and I just think this is a good thing to close the episode out on, because it's just like over the top and hilariously badass. And so this is in Elden Ring. The first kind of like main boss you get up to is from your friend Margit the Fell.
Oh, God.
And Margit had some dope lines in the trailer, but you get up there, you go to do the fight, and he says to you, and the voice actor like nails it. Like, he's got such a good, like, if I could even do like 1% as good of a
it's not possible
a rendition of this, but he says he's like, foul tarnished, in search of the Elden Ring, emboldened by the flame of ambition, someone must extinguish thy flame. Let it be Margit the Fell. And then he fights you, and then throughout the fight he keeps taunting. He's like, put these foolish ambitions to rest. And it is just like the coolest, most cinematic shit as you're fighting this boss, and like the orchestral music is swelling and going nuts, and this guy's like, foolish tarnish. And you're like, ah.
It's like the character, for whatever reason, I just do this thing like, foolish girl.
Yeah.
Like, I just say that for no reason.
That's Morgan. You're like, you're not supposed to talk to me while we're fighting, and he doesn't care. It's awesome. So.
Well, there you have it, folks.
Margit
is the number one. I think I personally prefer that the doll quote myself. But, yeah.
I prefer the doll too. I just think Margit's like, you know, it's just cool.
There you go. Everyone, you can let us know in the comments on YouTube what your favorite gaming quotes are, because, you know, there's just so many good ones, and we don't have the time to talk about all of them here. So you can let us know. But yeah, as always, I think that's going to do us for the episode. So thank you so much for joining us. Like Kate mentioned, we're only 2 episodes away from our top 25 list. It'll be fun. We'll also be inducting 2 games into the Ring of Honor, or whatever we want to call it. We'll workshop that before the episode. That'll be fun too. But as always, this has been Cloud Control, the gaming podcast. It's not just good, it's good enough. We'll see you on the next episode.